Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I kind of want to do something almost like a character bio. It's basically me talking about a DC character in particular that I recently did a little more research on. Basically, it's this character name, and I kind of have to pause because like there's different ways to pronounce his name. Like one of the first pronunciations I've seen it for his name when you Google it is Mxyzptlk. But if you go by like the 90s animated Superman cartoon, it's Mxyzptlk. I mean, for my own sanity and as well as just for the sake of the video, we're just gonna call him Mx for short. Now what sparked me to do this video is that Mx somewhat recently popped up in the Supergirl TV show, and prior to that I'd never really seen or heard of him before. But nevertheless, if you're unfamiliar, in case you don't watch Supergirl or whatever, Mx is a being from the fifth dimension, and essentially he has the power to basically make anything happen. He can literally bend reality. It's kind of interesting because during my research I ended up finding out it's like a version of him in the older comic books that initially his powers as a fifth dimensional were more technologically based. As you know, time went on with the character, and it's kind of like this applies to him in the TV show Supergirl as well, is the fact is that his powers more aligned with magic rather than technology in subsequent versions of the character. Which there are multiple versions of this character, not just in the comic books, but like Supergirl wasn't his first TV appearance. He made an appearance in like a 1980s Superboy TV show, which I didn't know existed. He also popped up in Lois and Clark Superman, which interestingly enough, as you know, Dean Cain is also on Supergirl, so I just thought that was kind of interesting. And he also popped up in Smallville, but I read into that version of him a little bit more. At least that particular version was very different from the one that was even on Supergirl. He didn't have like the reality bending powers like the normal Mx does. This particular character had more just of a mind controlling ability. Some other things I learned about Mx, well, for one, is his character design. Like his character has changed quite a bit, but nowadays like his design has basically most often been that typically ends up being the version of him I think that gets used often, like I said, with the exception of Supergirl and many other versions of him that's popped up in TV, because he's often called an imp. Because I thought that was kind of interesting that in this show Supergirl, Mondale kept referring to him as an imp. I'm like, I mean, because obviously like they were discussing it in Supergirl how he popped up, like, you know, fifth dimensional people have popped up like all throughout history and stuff like that. They're kind of based on what genies as well as leprechauns are based around, these fifth dimensional people. So I think in that particular case that was them referencing his comic book version. What's also interesting about him is that he's not necessarily a villain, not necessarily a good guy either, though I have read that in some versions of him in the comic books has been on the hero side of things. More so than anything, his existence is just, he's here to annoy people, more specifically Superman. From what I was reading, I never really heard too much about him really interacting with a lot of the other DC heroes. It seems more so than anyone to be Superman he likes to annoy, and it usually turns into a situation where Superman has to get like very smart about how he deals with them, because as a fifth dimensional, like they have this special condition when it comes to them. You basically have to get them to write or say their name backwards, and that's how you get them to leave. And I also found out that at least in versions of him in the comic book, there is actually a 90-day limit that prevents him from coming back immediately, because that was crossing my mind like during when I was watching Super. I was like, what's the stop him from ever just coming back? Is it like 100% locked? So far, you know, obviously we haven't delved too deeply into the character or fifth dimensional beings in general, so we don't know what the rules are for Supergirl, but at least the particular version of him from the comic books that I brought up earlier, basically the conditions would wear off in 90 days so he could come back. Though later versions of him kind of changed that up. He basically set his own conditions that he kind of has to leave on his own will, or at the very least Superman has to complete certain conditions for him to leave. He's mainly a Superman villain, and I like to think of him as like the Joker equivalent. He can do whatever he wants to Superman. He has the power to literally kill Superman whenever he wants to, but it's no fun. For him, it's all about fun. Why I'm bringing up the Batman / Joker comparison is the fact is that the Joker in some versions knows Batman's identity, but he doesn't tell anyone else who he is. You know, just exposing him ruins the fun. So I'm thinking that's what kind of applies with Mx and Superman. He just enjoys messing with him so much. There is a point in the comic books at some point where Mx actually gets all of his his powers, or at least majority of his powers, taken by the Joker, which is like super scary to think about. I haven't seen anything else bringing up the fact is that he's popped up in more recent DC stuff like Rebirth or anything like that. It's still something I looked into a little bit. There's still a lot more I haven't read about, so I'll probably add more to this video later on. I mean, obviously I'll probably do it in another video, but add more to it, just stuff I'm learning about him. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this video. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.